is hosted today. We had a really good one at 5 o'clock. Um, Quick break for a bite to eat, and we're back. And we really appreciate all the folks that hang in here and come back time and time again to hear what we have to say. Now, today I'm going to show you a lot of slides, like usual. We have to run through them pretty quickly because there are so many of them. But you get a PDF. You have all the links, and I encourage you to take a look at those links and pursue any area that we talk about tonight that you want to see in more depth. I know last time I got a little bit of feedback that said a lot of information, but not enough action items. So I have doubled down on action items this time. There's tons of action items that I hope that you'll pay attention to. So Bill, you want to talk a little about our a word from our sponsor here?
Yes, I do, and I will bring up some slides. So I should pop them up in just a few minutes here. Debbie, let me know if you see the slides.
There you go. You're starting up there, Bill.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. As Ed just said, we've been Zooming all day. We started at 9 a.m. and we'll be Zooming still at 10 or 9 p.m. And it's really been cool. So this is NWSOFA, which stands for Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action. We are an indivisible chapter located in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Tonight's presentation is on immigration, human rights, and the fight for our democracy. I'll just let that sink in for a few seconds. Those three items all tied together. And at the very end, the fight for our democracy. So we're glad that everybody is here. Now, I said just a second ago that we were part of Indivisible. Our organization joined Indivisible about 7 years ago. Indivisible is located all across the country. We have 2,700, almost 2,800 chapters now. We're growing at the amount of 4 to 5 per day. New chapters, 4 to 5 per day. Each one of those little dots is a new chapter, and there's one in every state now. And there's about 20 countries now that have indivisible chapters in them. So why do we exist and why do we have these programs? Well, we want you to understand the facts of what the particular program's about. We want you to sharpen your arguments and your discussions with your friends and your neighbors and the people that you talk to. And we want you, when you're talking to them, to be able to communicate in a smart and intelligent way where you have facts and you have data to back up the fact, where you got that information from. And you'll find out that Ed basically references every one of his facts at some point. Now, Indivisible, NWSOFA-Indivisible, we're organized on the twin snowflake principle. On the left side in the orange, you see our communications group. You'll see all those different areas, the ways that we communicate to people. And we employ just about every one of those on every program, particularly ones that have Ed on them, because we want to make sure we reach the maximum audience. And then on the right-hand side, you see in the turquoise is all of our issue teams. There's 19 issue teams now. As of January last year, we only had 10. Those were the ones on the outside. During this last year, we added 9 more. Those are the ones that are on the inside. You'll notice on the left side, it says ROD, Confronting Disinformation, ROD, Voting Rights, Elections. ROD stands for Restore Our Democracy. That is who Ed is the lead of in our organization. And the reason that there's 2 is originally ROD started out working on voting rights, elections, gerrymandering, vote by mail, everything to do with elections. And then he started saying, well, I got to be dealing with the news of the day. And that's exactly where we are today, the news of the day, what's going on. So to manage these, we have 30 all volunteer leads. And you can see their pictures here, right underneath one of them. Each person, you can see what they do. We have some crossover between communications and issues. And on some of the groups, we have 2 leads. But this is the secret sauce. This is how we get everything done. This is how we were able to publish almost 850 programs last year for our members. Now, what's new in our organization? We use this QR code. If you take a picture of that, it instantly takes you what's known as a link tree. Each one of those yellow bars, and it goes down about 15, takes you to a different area of NWSOFA, whether it's our website, whether it's our sign-up page, whether it's Substack, whether it's our Blue Sky, our YouTube. It just goes on and on, but you really can get a feel for what we can do when we have this amount of volunteers that are supporting what we do. Tonight, we are recording this program. It is on our YouTube channel. This is a picture of what the live YouTube looks like. You go up to NWSOFA website, nwsofa.org. You click on YouTube channel, you hit one click, and it takes into a massive group of videos, probably 300. Just click on the area that says live right in the center, and then you'll see the one pop up that we are watching tonight. The live YouTube has about a 35-second delay from the actual program. So if you get up, you go to the bathroom, you think you missed something, you can recover right away. Just want to make sure everybody knows that March 28th, we have No Kings 3 across the country. On Monday, Tuesday, I was able to announce to our coffee and conversation group that 600 groups had already signed up. As of this morning, over 1,000 groups have signed up. The goal for Indivisible, Move On, 5051, all the groups that are participating, and there's about 75 different groups. ACLU, lots of unions, lots of Democratic groups. Our goal is to get over 12 million people, which would be that mystical 3.5% of the population, which means we can change what's going on. So tonight, I'm going to turn this thing over to Ed, and in 1 second, we're going to be seeing immigration, human rights, and the fight for democracy. And how we're going to handle questions is we're going to ask you to ask or to put your questions in the chat. And so that we can figure out what the questions are versus the conversations, start with a huge question, all in caps. And at the very end, Debbie will be consolidating these and we'll ask those to Ed. And Ed, at that point, I'm going to say, take it away.
All right, thank you, Bill. Let me get my screen going here. Okay, so we've got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. It's a long presentation. I'm going to run through it fairly quickly, but you're going to get the slides. You're going to get all the links. You can look at this stuff in depth and research it. We're going to talk about what's going on right now, what the federal government is doing, and how what they're doing is impacting our economy and our civil rights. And we'll touch on why they're doing it. We're going to talk about what kind of immigration policies really make sense for our country, how many immigrants we should be bringing in, and how we should be dealing with asylum requests. We'll talk about how we can reform those immigration policies, how we can strengthen our civil rights, and we have a lot of calls to action this time. As I mentioned earlier, before some of you were on, last time I did one of these, I had a comment that there's a lot of information, but not enough action. So I doubled down, tripled down on action items tonight. So there's going to be a lot we can all do. And it's important that we do it because nobody else is going to do it. So here's where we are today. We can see that ICE and Border Patrol agents are just violating our constitutional rights through warrantless raids. We'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by that. We see immigration enforcement expansion is outpacing the accountability that we expect from our government. We have seen families torn apart, communities living in fear. And we see right now we're in the middle. It's not imminent. We're in the middle of a small shutdown. It's just the Homeland Security area of the government that's shut down. Uh, but we had we have the government deciding they don't have to follow the Constitution, deciding that they don't need a warrant, a judicial warrant. First of all, there's two kinds of warrants. There's a judicial warrant that is a real warrant, comes from a judge, part of a judge who's part of our judiciary, part of the third branch of our government. Um, and then there's administrative warrants, which are kind of not part of the judiciary. They come from the administration. They come from some branch of the presidency. Um, and we have a law that says we passed a law which says we can arrest undocumented people out on the streets on a administrative warrant. But that doesn't mean that we can invade a house on an administrative warrant. The Constitution is pretty clear that you need to have approval from a judge before you go breaking into somebody's house. And the the government has been using administrative warrants to pick up people, and now they have told ICE that they can use an administrative warrant to break into somebody's house, which is not what the law authorized, and it's not constitutional. So that's a pretty strong step that they're taking, and you hear people talk about it right now in the Senate. They're debating. Well, not right now because they're off this week, but last week they were debating this issue of when do we need a judicial warrant or when is an administrative warrant good enough? And the guys on the right are saying administrative warrants work. We can make progress with administrative warrants. If we have to go for judicial warrants, we can't make as much progress. And what they're basically saying is we don't want to follow the Constitution because it holds us back. Well, you know what? That's what the Constitution is there to do. It's there to hold the federal government back. So that's a sticking that probably the biggest sticking point in the negotiations that's ongoing. And by the way, I listen to a particular program that I think I want to recommend to you. It's on satellite radio, XM Sirius XM. It's on the POTUS channel. It's Julie Mason's show. It's on from 2 to 5 Central Time, and she primarily interviews reporters. She interviews politicians from both sides. But what's most interesting when she interviews reporters. And so she was asking one of the guys from some news organization that covers the Senate, and she said, "So how is the Senate negotiation going in terms of settling this small government shutdown we have?" And he said, "Well, we're not hearing anything. Nobody's leaking it. Nobody's leaking what the Dems are asking for, what the Republicans are asking for, and that's a good thing because that means they're probably negotiating good faith and not just trying to pull the rug out from one another." So this stuff about whether we're going to have a judicial warrant or not to break into somebody's house is being discussed right now, and we need to make sure our senators understand where we stand on this. I know they do. We talk about the enforcement operation expanding, outpacing our ability to hold them to account. Well, the courts try and hold them to account, but ICE has violated thousands of court orders. They continue to act unlawfully, despite all kinds of judicial rulings. Over 4,000 times, ICE has jailed people illegally, and it hasn't slowed down. Um, and this is a conservative Bush appointment, Chief Judge Patrick Schlitz, yeah. The beer that made Milwaukee famous. Oh, excuse me. Documented 96 court order violations in 74 different cases just in January. ICE has likely violated more court orders in January than some federal agencies have violated in their entire existence. And multiple judges are threatening contempt citations. So, it's really clear that they're moving so fast, they're pushing so hard that the kinds of accountability mechanisms we have in place Can't keep up. Just cannot keep up. Yeah. Oh, here's another slide on that topic. The courts across the country have overwhelmingly rejected their efforts to round up thousands of immigrants and lock them up without a chance for a bond, even if they have no criminal record. Uh, but the Trump administration is using slow walking techniques, outright defying judges' orders. When the judge demands release, sometimes ICE has raced detainees across state lines in a way that judges say are designed to thwart legal proceedings. They detain people for days or weeks after judges ordered them to be released. They've ignored other arms of the federal government trying to ensure compliance with civil orders. Sometimes the administration has just given judges bad or incomplete information. This is all going on. It's all well documented. We all need to understand exactly how far our government is going. Families being torn apart. They're separating migrant families in the U.S. Parents inside the United States are being arrested by immigration authorities. Uh, they're in line to pick up their kids from school, and they get arrested, leaving their kids not picked up from school. Um, they center on fear, devastation, and the threat of separation is a strategy. They use it as a strategy to advance the deportations, to reduce immigration of children and families. In the process, the government is compromising children's safety. Now we've seen them do this before. Last time they were deliberately separating children from parents at the border. Well, now they're doing it inside the country. And we'll have there's another slide on this that's even more devastating that we'll get to. Uh, oh, this is it. Speaking of families torn apart, we're now holding asylum seekers in detention instead of paroling them into the country. Now, the thing you need to understand is that when somebody comes across the border and requests asylum, we have a choice. The government has a choice. They can throw them in jail and hold them in jail until we can have a hearing, which could take years given how backlogged the court is. Or we can parole them into the country. We can give them a work permit. We can give them a social number, social security number. We can let them go to work. We can let them earn a living so they can support themselves and their family and pay taxes. Biden routinely paroled people in the country unless they had a criminal record, unless they were really obviously a bad guy. They paroled them in the country and let them work. And you know what? That those people that Biden brought into the country, asylum seekers, and he let them work. That was one of the biggest reasons that our economy recovered strongly after the pandemic. Now Trump's doing it differently. Trump is saying, "I'm not going to parole anybody." I'm going to keep them all in jail. You come across the border, you're going to be in jail until you get your hearing. Now that costs us money to house them. It can damage their children. If you have a strong stomach, follow this link and read it. This is a family fleeing Putin, an engineer, a nurse, three young children that made their way to our southern border and said, "We can't stand living in Russia. We want to come to the West." And they threw him in jail, and they're keeping him there in despicable conditions with three young kids. And the guy from Russia says, even in Russia, we don't treat children like this. Now, just to show you how fast things are moving, just before the presentation, I saw a news item. Homeland Security yesterday issued a memo saying if you're in the country and you haven't got a green card yet, we're going to arrest you. All those people that Biden paroled into the country who are working, paying taxes, he wants to arrest them all and hold them. Well, he says hold them for rescreening. Who knows how long rescreening is going to take? They could possibly be held in jail until their hearing. He's just going to, all the people we said, you're welcome here. You can come in and work and raise your family, and we'll figure out your status eventually. He says, I just take all that back. I'm going to throw all you people in jail. So this is hard to believe. Okay, so right now we're in the middle of a shutdown. The Senate has been clear. that we've all taken an oath to uphold the law of the country, and the Department of Homeland Security is out of control. That's the Democratic viewpoint. They want to restrict agents from wearing masks, require them to wear identification, standardized uniforms, so they don't necessarily look like shock troops, um, ban racial profiling, require judicial warrants, enter private property. That really is the major thing. And bar immigration enforcement in sensitive areas like medical facilities, schools, childcare facilities, churches, polling places, and courts. Uh, and they want reasonable use of force standards and allow states and local jurisdictions to investigate and prosecute excessive force by federal agents. And most of the demands that Democratic leaders are bringing forth are just asking DHS to simply follow the law and existing guidelines like every other police organization we have in the country. And they act like some of their demands are hard to approve. Right. Following our Constitution is hard to approve. Um, they're just rejecting some of these commands. The one about judicial warrants, Republican leaders said, we are not going to give up the idea that we can break into somebody's house without a judicial warrant, which is just totally against our Constitution. They don't want to. They don't want to give up the masks, saying it was exposed agents to harassment and threats. Well, maybe it would, but none of our other police wear masks, and they don't worry about threats as much because they're not being so punitive and aggressive towards our population. They want to end roving patrols. They want to restrict arrests at sensitive locations. These are all, in my mind, reasonable things to require from our law enforcement agencies. And it remains to be seen how this shutdown is going to end. Nothing's happening this week because the Senate's gone. Maybe next week they'll start talking again. But the administration has taken a lot of steps to limit immigration. They've reduced the number of immigrations they'll accept. They've banned travel. They're really working very hard to get rid of everybody they can. And as I mentioned, they don't want to do this catch and release thing where they parole people into the country. We have reduced our admissions level from 125,000 immigrants we can take in a year to 7,500. Really? That's almost nothing. This is the lowest level since 1980, since the current program and guidelines were established. And you know who they wanted it? They want to admit white Afrikaners in South America because they think they're victims of illegal or unjust discrimination, which is just ridiculous. Here are the federal emissions caps. You can see they go up and down. Under H.W. Bush, they were pretty high. They came down under Clinton. They went real down under W. Bush. Bottom break up to about average. Trump crashed them. Biden brought them above average, and Trump has crashed them again. And this is how many people we legally allow into our country, not asylum seekers, but people we will accept as legal immigrants. And then they ban travel on up to 20 countries. These people, that means anybody in any of these countries that would like to immigrate to the U.S., they can't even come on a visitor's visa. Actually, I'm not sure that's true. Yeah, I think it is true. I think that there's no travel allowed from any of these countries. Um, here's an interesting page. If you're really into this stuff and you want to keep track of what he's changing, this page that's linked here is updated weekly, showing you the latest changes. For example, one of the recent postings is if you're from these 75 countries, there's all visa processing and meaning immigration visa applications are on hold. That doesn't pause tourist, student, or other temporary visas. But you can get the details of what's going on at this page if you really want to get into this. So this has had an impact on our workforce in our country. We had a net negative level of well, I mean, what that means, a reduction in the size of our workforce. Our immigrant workforce shrank. Our we have more people leaving than coming, and that's going to have big impacts. There was a big drop off of entries into the U.S. in 2025. Um, the net migration between minus 10,000 and maybe almost 300,000 in 2025. This is the first time in a half a century that we've had more people leaving than coming. And that's going to continue this coming year. And that's going to dampen growth in our labor force. It's going to dampen consumer spending too, because these people not only work, but they also buy. And that impacts our GDP all the way around. Um, it's going to be negative job growth throughout 2026. Here's a graph about this, and you can see how this is this is unauthorized immigration. Unauthorized immigration, meaning asylum seekers. It was it went way up. It went way up under Biden. It absolutely did. Uh, but it's come down now to the point where you see the blue stuff is people coming in, and the green stuff is people leaving. Well, now we're at the point that there's more people leaving than coming in, and that's going to have a bad influence, a bad input for us because the black line is the net of those two, and the net of those two is now negative. We have just people leaving our workforce, shrank by 1 million workers, and there's nobody replacing those workers, and it's not going to level off. And if you focus on working age and adults, 16 to 65, it's terrible. So 50,000 unorganized workers in 1 month alone left our country. This is extremely bad for our economy, and there are costs to that. Immigration has always been very important to our economy, our communities, and our future, because immigrants, in many ways, drive economic growth, and they certainly contribute to healthcare, agriculture, and construction sectors. Um, how much does immigration affect the U.S. economy? Immigrants generated almost 2 trillion, 1.7 trillion in economic activity back in 2023. And most economists say that immigration is good for the economy. It helps grow the size of our labor force. It boosts tax revenue. It increases consumers' demand because these people not only work and pay taxes, but they spend what they earn. They're probably living paycheck to paycheck. They're probably spending most of what they earn. They paid 650 billion in taxes. CBO estimates that the greater level of immigration expected between 2023 and 2024 and 2034 would boost domestic gross product by almost $9 trillion. And nearly half of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants. Say that again. Nearly half of Fortune 500 companies were founded, the ones founded in 2025 were founded by immigrants. These people make a really serious contribution to our country, and they make very serious contributions to specific workforces. Um, we have sectors that really depend on immigrant workers. Almost 1 in 7 workers in our country is an immigrant. 1 in 7. The updated state level data shows that how immigrants, including those who are undocumented, they make crucial contributions in their work in vital industries, in healthcare, in agriculture, in construction, in starting companies. We see that we have 100, we're short 135,000 healthcare workers by 2036 with the trends the way they're going. And immigrants are playing a vital role in many of those areas. But I've got a friend who's a nurse male nurse up in Minneapolis, and he says, half the people in the hospital that are not doctors but are doing patient care at one level or another are not. Most of them are not undocumented, but they're all immigrants, and that's a really important part of our healthcare system. 16% of all nurses, 27% of all healthcare aides are immigrants. In New York and New Jersey, over half of all healthcare aides are foreign born. These 5 states, 1 in 4 nurses are immigrants. 1 in 4 physicians are immigrants in certain states. We're really playing with fire with our nation's healthcare when we start throwing these people out. Think about agriculture. Um, Agriculture is a 1.5 trillion part of our GDP, and we increasingly rely on some imported produce. And scarcity in farm labor is why we have to import more and not growing as much as we should. Immigrant workers are a crucial part of our workforce. I see articles every day about rural communities, rural red communities that were surprised that their farm workers are being taken. They thought it would only be criminals in big cities that would be arrested. Um, Over half of graders and sorters of agriculture products are immigrants. 25% of workers in the agriculture industry overall are immigrants. You take out 25% of a workforce and you think you're not going to damage a sector of your economy? These farmers, they rely on these skilled workers. Uh, and they're skilled workers because they're used to working in this area. They know how to do it in a productive manner. Somebody some college kid steps in there and tries to do what they do, they cannot keep up with the productivity that a skilled immigrant can do in picking crops, in working a meat processing plant, in grading produce. It's not something that we can easily reproduce. In construction, immigrants play a key role in building new homes. We want to have how we have housing shortages. We need to have more housing built. We need to reduce the cost of housing, but scarcity of skilled workers is exacerbating the problem. Um, we estimate that there's 500,000 workers in the construction industry by 2025 that we're short of, that we can't find, that we can't get projects started. We have things that we want to do. We don't have people to do them anymore. Immigrants are filling these roles and working to address housing shortage, and we're throwing them out. 1 in 4 workers were immigrants in 2022. In some states, California and Texas, it's higher, 40% are immigrants. And we talked about how some of these people actually start businesses. That means, some of them are just picking crops, but some of the people that come here are highly motivated. They're really smart. They're skilled, and they directly create jobs. They start and run businesses at a higher rate. Even the guys that are just starting a liquor store in your neighborhood or a convenience store in your neighborhood, they're starting a business. They're employing some people. Um, these people enrich our streets. They employ community members. They help fuel our economy. And they're only 14% of our population, but they made up more than 1 in 5 entrepreneurs, over 22% of people starting businesses. So the immigrants they want to come here, they're motivated to work, they want to get a leg up. They start businesses, they create jobs more than our own people born here do. Um, 1 in 3 business owners in California, Florida, New Jersey, New York are immigrants. In every state, immigrants overrepresented as entrepreneurs. Uh, Maybe not at the Fortune 500 level, but at the who's starting a new restaurant in your neighborhood, who's starting a store in your neighborhood. These people are helping make our economy work. And they also are important at the higher levels as well. We need engineers, we need mathematicians, we need science and technology. We graduate a lot, but there's a lot overseas as well They want to come here. Some of them come here to go to school because we have the best schools in the world. And when they're done going to school, they want to stay here. In Pennsylvania, Washington State, 40% of our physical scientists are foreign born. Software developers were often foreign born. Yeah, I worked in software. I had a lot of foreign born guys working for me. They were smart. They were good employees. There's absolutely no reason to limit them coming in, much less throw out the ones that are already here. Because when you do this kind of stuff, you're disrupting our labor markets. You have sudden vacancies. You have worker shortages. You have businesses closing additional days because they can't get the staffing they need. You have tighter labor markets do drive inflation. We have seen a decline in the foreign-born population, reflecting increased immigration enforcement because of deportations, because of reduction in regular maintenance of the border, migration at the border, and that has all reshaped our labor market. It creates challenges for industries that heavily depend on immigration workers. Key sectors have experienced significant labor shortages that affects their production. It affects their service delivery, their project timelines, even their consumer prices go up because of this kind of stuff. The reality is we need talented workers, and some of those are immigrants. We need these people to fill essential positions. And even Trump has acknowledged we need some of these guys. And that underscores a real problem here. The central issue is immigrants in the labor force make essential contributions to our economy, not only in filling job vacancies, but also in sustaining tax system, engaging in commerce, supporting population growth, enhancing our long-term economic potential. And one of the ways we can think about this is that let's say, okay, we don't want illegals crossing the border. Let's say we want to control asylum people that we can't schedule when they come in or how. But if we have successfully reduced irregular migration, then we should increase regular migration because we need the workers. So maybe we can sell that as the trade-off. Okay, so we tightened up the border. Now let's bring in more legal immigrants because we need the workers. This has caused rising wages and labor costs. I mean, rising wages are good for the workers, but rising wages also increase overall labor costs and prices. Um, we have strong wage growth in immigrant related sectors, um, and we have a negative supply shock adding to inflationary pressures. This is part of why inflation is so hard to tame. The federal chair has echoed the view, noting that labor market remains tight due to the decline in the labor force with a lower share of the immigrants. That does affect our economy. It affects individual businesses. You've got 1 in 5 business owners saying they've lost employees due to deportations, visa denials, ICE raids, and that's hurting their businesses. Um, they've had losses, average loss of $12,000 for trying to replace a lost worker. Replacing a worker is not cheap. Almost 70% of businesses had to raise wages significantly to attract new workers. And while there's a good side to that, people are earning more money, there's a bad side to that, which is that the businesses are less profitable and they have to raise their prices. 72% of small business owners have had to shut down locations. They've had to reduce hours. They've had to delay expansions because they don't have enough workers. And half of small business owners have decided to relocate or are considering moving because they can't find enough workers where they are. Almost half of small businesses owners say migration enforcement is hurting their industry. And surprisingly, the effect on the current inflation is not as big as you'd think. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is, yeah, reducing the number of people we have working, it means that there's a problem in the labor supply, but it also means there's a problem in demand because those people they kicked out, not only were they working, but they were also spending their salaries and buying. So businesses have reduced a reduction in immigration. That causes a reduction in labor supply. but it also causes the reduction in demands for goods and services. And I got to tell you, I was surprised to see this. So we can see that what they're doing is not hurting inflation as much as we expected it would, primarily because it's hurting supply, but it's also hurting demand. And everything about inflation and prices is demand versus supply. So if demand is high and supply is low, you're getting higher prices. But if supply goes down and demand goes down as well, then it doesn't hurt you as much as I thought it was going to. Hey, there's levels, there's community level risk consequences, there's revenue declines in immigrant neighborhoods, workers who fear going to work, local tax bases eroding. Los Angeles, which got hit early and is a sure sign of what's to come for all of us. 35% of their population contributes to the regional economy. Um, there's almost 1 million undocumented immigrants working there. They work in retail trade, they work in construction, other services, manufacturing. And those four industries there are 2/3 of all the undocumented people in the LA area. Um, and they generate $2.5 billion in economic activity. Um, but that's all in decline. Uh, there's a pervasive climate of fear across the impacted neighborhoods, documented through 178 business interviews, fundamentally altering consumer behavior. People don't want to go out in the streets. They don't want to go out to shop. Customers are staying home. They avoid certain areas. They reduce their spending in areas where there are a lot of immigrants. And that climate of fear has driven reduced consumer activity, consumers avoiding public spaces, contributing to revenue losses. 82% of the businesses in LA had negative effects. 44% of them reporting revenues exceeding half of their income. 38% of businesses reported major negative impacts to short-term financial stability. And I'm sure this is same thing is probably happening in Minneapolis. Some of this happened in Chicago. Um, this is the more and more they declare war on cities, the more those cities are going to be affected economically like this. Workers who are afraid to go to work. Construction relies heavily on immigrant workers, and that means you might have a concentration of immigrants in an area. 30% of the workers in the U.S. construction industry are foreign born. Some states it's higher. But when they focus immigration activities at a job site or near a job site or where day laborers congregate, um, that causes people to say, you know what, I can't go to work today because if I go to work today, I'm going to end up in El Salvador or in jail. Projects have been postponed, scaled back. We have higher housing costs, increased difficulty keeping pace with demand for residential commercial development because we're making workers afraid to go to work. And that is affecting local tax bases. The local tax base, the local undocumented immigrants contributed almost 40 billion to state and local governments in 2022. And all these deportations, reduced compliance would directly reduce this revenue stream. Washington State finds 10% of undocumented residents were deported. Washington would lose 100 million per year in taxes. North Carolina estimates undocumented residents paid almost 700 million state and local taxes, and just deporting 10% of that is 70 million less tax base that the state and local communities have. So if this keeps up, the consequences in the long term are going to be pretty severe. If this keeps up by 2035, we'll have almost 16 million fewer workers than we thought we were going to have. Our economic growth could be cut by a third. We could have almost 2.5 million people removed from our workforce. And that could impact our productivity and our GDP growth by $1 trillion. So why are they doing this? Why are they targeting immigrants? It's a scapegoating. They're scapegoating immigrants to try and make excuses for failed economic policies. They have implemented economic policies which over the last 50 years have caused the real middle class to have a lot of economic stress. We've been facing challenges wage stagnation, growing inequality, rising costs for housing, for healthcare, for education. And these problems stem from tax policies favoring corporations, not from immigration. So politicians are just basically scapegoating immigrants to deflect attention from their failure to address the wealth inequality, the lack of robust social safety nets, and that's giving supporters a concrete enemy while avoiding the real systematic changes that we need to make. So we have kind of a ruling class here using the immigration rhetoric to divert our anger away from policy failures and ability to curb inflation, stagnant wages, eroding worker protection. We're being scammed. That's why they're doing this. Um, Trump tried to pin rising costs on immigration workers, claiming immigrants drive inflation. But the real cause is decades of policies like artificially low interest rates, quantitative easing, protectionism, and blaming immigrants for housing shortages. I mean, he said we kick out a bunch of immigrants and that'll free up housing for everybody else. Oh, come on. That's no, kicking out immigrants means we can't build as much houses. When we blame immigrants, we're just deflecting attention from long-term policy failures, chronic undersupply of housing, planning constraints, inadequate labor protections, and we just offer a simple and emotionally satisfying explanation that the immigrants are to blame, which is nonsense. Because blaming immigrants for stagnating wages, for the growing chasm between the rich and the poor, that detracts from the real problem. Too many of our elected officials are responsible for tax and other public policies that favor special interests, corporations, and don't take care of the average guy. Mass deportations won't fix this. One of the reasons they're doing it is because of how the makeup of refugees has changed. In used to be back here, we had a lot of people from Europe and Central Asia, um, white Christians, basically, in many cases. We've always had we had a lot of East Asians as well. But as time goes on, the demographics have changed. And now we have a lot of Middle Eastern and Southern Asian. Um, African is, we didn't used to have much African at all. We have a lot of African now. We have much higher Latin American, much higher Middle Eastern. And these are different kinds of people than we used to be getting back here. And this is why people will say, we're our country is changing in ways we don't like. Our country is changing in ways that mean we're losing our country. But you know what? No matter where these immigrants come from, we need the immigrants. So we've always brought immigrants in. We've always um, not only assimilated them, but expanded our own culture from what they bring. And we need to keep doing that. But some people don't want to do it because of the kinds of people that are coming in now. So let's talk for a minute about what kind of policies we really want. We need to bring in enough immigrants to ensure our workforce continues to grow, even as baby boomers like myself leave the workforce. We can do that two ways. We can raise the cap on legal immigration, or we can be more accepting of asylum requesters, because our current immigration policies are not sufficient to our needs. Even if we normalize immigration, even if we get it back to the average we had before, uh, that won't be enough to counteract the baby bulge people like myself who are retiring and who will eventually shuffle off this mortal coil. Um, we are in kind of a demographic autumn, and winter is coming. The retirement of baby boomers, the overall aging of our population, as well as the low and falling birth rate, means population growth is going to become entirely dependent. Uh-oh, my computer's got a problem. Crap. My battery is very low. Oh, what do we do now?
May need to plug in, Ed.
I am plugged in. I had this problem earlier too. Okay, I'm afraid that I might end up getting bumped out of here. If I'm bumped out of here, I will be back very quickly. Not sure what's going on with this computer. Um, Even if immigration normalizes, we're not going to have enough people coming in. This is what we've seen in our labor force. We've got not much growth. If you look around 2020, 2022, and 2024, our native-born labor force is pretty flat. Our foreign-born labor force is where our increases are coming from. We have 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day. We cannot replace those people with our internal birth rate. Without new immigration, uh, we're going to have declining numbers of workers in our country. Post-pandemic immigration surge was a key driver to how we recovered. So bringing in those people really helped. But if you look at what's going to happen, even if we keep immigration at a pre-pandemic average, the fact that we're going to have more and more births minus deaths means that our total population is going to continue to decline. The point being that even if we return to the immigration levels that were in place before Trump administration, that won't meet our needs. We're going to need to bring in more immigrants than we have in the past, not fewer. Trump's whole goal is to not bring people in, and that's completely backwards. What we need in this country is to bring in more people than we have in the past, not fewer. I mean, not as many as Biden did, but more than the average before Biden. And then let's talk about people who are coming for asylum. You know, our history shows that people come here when their home place is under stress. They have economic hardship, they have famine, they have persecution. Those have been the reasons that people have come here. No, people don't just decide to upend their life and get on a boat across the ocean for fun or for a little advantage. They come here when they have to come here. And right now, we accept asylum requests only for very limited reasons. And most of the reasons that most of the people that apply for asylum, when they finally get that formal hearing in a year or two, they get denied. We're going to have to change those policies. We could change those policies and retain more asylum seekers. That's one way out of this. But if we don't change those policies, our claim denial rates are very high. Many of the workers who help power the recovery, they're on shaky legal grounds. In fact, I just showed you earlier that the thing that came out yesterday that said they're going to try and go out and arrest everybody who doesn't already have a green card. Most of the asylum claims end in denial. Many of the workers who helped power our recovery have no stable long-term status. Well, you know, we could try and turn the asylum program into a labor program. We could use evidence-based reforms that would pair a humane, lawful asylum system, but more importantly, we should have a separate, durable legal pathway so that needed workers can stay, keep working legally, and fully participate in our economy. So the bottom line on asylum is that people come here when they feel like they have to, and the push factors of violence, political corruption, environmental degradation, lack of access to healthcare and education. That's what has been driving people here forever. And we don't allow them, we only recognize persecution as a basis. We don't allow economic factors. We don't allow climate factors. So many of the people who are fleeing conditions, they're fleeing conditions similar to what brought our ancestors here. But currently, they have no legal pathway that fits their reality. So we need to reform that. We need to reform that one way or another. Either we could expand the legal pathways for asylum beyond narrow persecution categories. We could broaden that to include climate displacement and economic environmental crises. That would be difficult politically. The other thing we can do is create more legal immigration pathways. Raise that cap from not from 7,500 back to 250,000, but raise it up to 500,000 because that's what we're going to need one way or another. So that would mean we wouldn't try and turn asylum system into how we get our workers, which is probably a better way to go. So the bottom line is people came here fleeing famine and poverty. We can either expand asylum to help them come in through a silent claim, or we can expand legal immigration. And I really think the second option is more realistic. We need more H-2A agricultural visas, more H-2B seasonal workers, more H-1B skilled workers, and we need pathways for citizenship for the workers who are already here contributing to our economy. So we ought to fix this one way or another. If we're not going to depend on asylum claims to get the workers we need, we really have to stop this catch and release system, which is something we've done. Trump did that. But we need to turn around after that and properly fund the immigration courts and fix the legal pathways so that we can bring in the workers we need. And we need to fix the legal pathways before we fund the immigration courts. Because if we fund the immigration courts and we quickly get rid of everybody in the country, we won't have enough workers. We got to fix the legal pathways so we can bring in more immigrants, and then we can fund the immigration courts to clean up the backlog of people that we have. Well, aside from all that, we still have our values, our rights, and our democracies at stake here. Because we've seen Fourth Amendment protections disregarded. We've seen due process undermined. We've seen equal protection, freedom, discrimination, outlaw ignored. We've seen families separated, communities traumatized, and we're fighting for accountability over an oversight for what ICE is doing. We want protection of our constitutional rights for all our people, all our residents. Just because you're not a citizen doesn't mean you don't have rights under our Constitution. We want humane immigration policies that welcome the contribution of immigrants, and we want recognition that immigrant rights are, in fact, human rights. But before we can get any of that, we have to fix our democracy. We can come to see that immigrants are needed, and we can be ready to accept them, but we can't get our immigration policies lined up with that realization unless we make our federal government pay attention to what we want. We got to make our federal government see that our civil rights cannot be violated. Our freedom of the press has got to be enforced. Free and fair elections have to be upheld. And so what I've got for you in a call to action is a three-part call to action. We have to educate the public, your friends, your family, your church members. We have to act to restore our civil rights so that our democracy actually works. And once our democracy is working, then we can press our representatives for immigration reform. So educate your community. Share what you've learned tonight, because knowledge is power. Spread the truth about what you've learned tonight. Share this presentation. You're going to get the slide deck that you have a whole bunch of links you can follow, but please send the slide deck on and post key facts you see on your social media accounts. Offer to present this material to your community, your church, your synagogue, your mosque, your community organization. So use the talking points with your family and friends, how immigrants contributed so much, how nearly half of Fortune 500 companies are founded by immigrants, how undocumented paid so much in taxes. The real problem isn't immigration, it's failed policies that favor corporations of workers. Make these points where you can. Educate your community. Counter disinformation when you encounter it. When you hear false claims about immigrants, respond with the facts you've learned tonight. Share the reliable resources. You've got tons of links in here you can share. And challenge anybody scapegoating, pushing these scapegoating narratives by redirecting them to the real economic problems we have. Educate your community. Engage in conversations. Don't just argue. Listen. Listen to understand their concerns. Acknowledge the real problems they are expressing. Sympathize with them. You're right. It's not and, it's not but, it's your right that housing is too expensive. Here's what's causing it. Why don't we work together to fix it? Here's some resources for educating the community. Just a few links. Next, we got to defend our civil rights and our democracy. We have to take concrete actions to restore constitutional protections. Immediate actions, things you can do this week. Contact your local officials demanding ICE accountability. Call your local people, your alderperson, your city council member. Demand municipal policies restricting ICE actions. There's a lot of that going on. There's a good bandwagon that people can jump on. Push for judicial warrant requirements for that says for immigration arrests, but really what you need to push for judicial warrants is for breaking into people's houses. Request that local law enforcement not cooperate with ICE with that when they don't have judicial warrants. And here in Illinois, contact Cook County, demand courthouse protection, um, write to your state representatives, senators supporting state level legislation. Uh, there's links here that'll help you know how to do those things. Uh, we need to defend our democracy. Join rapid response community defense networks. There's a link there for Illinois Coalition for Immigration Reform, where you can volunteer to company networks that support immigrants at ICE check-ins and hearings. You should know your rights. Not saying you should put yourself in danger, but you should know your rights. Join rapid response teams in Chicago. There's a National Immigration Justice Center where you can volunteer to help out of legal clinics. You can participate in court observation programs. You can support deportation defense efforts. There's a link for that. You can organize your own communities against deportation. Direct action. There's stuff you can do this week, this month. You can support local challenges and accountability. You can donate to organizations that make a difference, the ACLU, the American Immigration Council, the MacArthur Justice Center. You can support local court monitoring to ever document ICE violations. You can take a look at what they're doing in Minnesota, 96 court orders violations. We can get involved in this kind of work. We need to protect our freedom of press and our freedom for peaceful protest. Attend peaceful, lawful protests where ICE overreach occurs, support independent journalism, document ICE activities, know your rights, but stay on public property so that you can't be getting in trouble when you're observing. Demand broader democratic reforms with the major things we need, like Supreme Court term limits, ethics codes, voting rights protection, advocate for transparency in government operations. Brennan Center can help you see where your opportunities to help with that stuff is. That's why you have all these links in here. You make a monthly commitment. Attend at least one monthly community training, meeting, or action per month. The people on this call, you're already doing that, I think. But help your family members, help your friends make this kind of commitment. Make at least 2 contacts to elected officials per month. Support at least one organization, either with money or with time. And here's some resources you can follow to see how to do that. And then this is the next step. After we get control back of our government, we need to push Congress to create humane, pro-growth immigration policies because we need immigrants. And we demand policies that reflect that. Contact members of Congress, your representatives, email them, meet with them in person when you can. And the message to push is we need to raise the cap on legal immigration. With so many people retiring, we need more people to build our jobs. Uh, if we bring in people, we can boost our GDP by almost 9 trillion in 10 years. But we need to bring in people. We need to bring in legal immigrants to help do that. We need to reform our asylum system to be humane and functional. The denial rates are too high. The system is too slow. Many workers who help power our country through this economy have no legal pathway to citizenship, and we have to have legal pathways that are separate from asylum. We need to bring in enough people, not just from asylum claims, but from legal immigration to expand our workforce. We expand work visas. We have to reduce processing times. You're going to get all these slides. You can look through these and decide where you're going to help, but find a place where you're going to help because we need to provide pathways to citizenship. We could waste $1 trillion, devastate our economy with mass deportations because we'll be throwing away 37 billion an annual contribution in taxes. And there are specific bills that we can support. Follow the link. You'll find the bills we can support. We need to advocate for improvements in integration. We have pre-written messages to Congress you can find at this link. Leverage your representatives for constituent services. Uh, you can do that in several ways. Join the organizations that are working hard for this. Reform Immigration, America's Voice, National Immigration Law Center. Make a monthly commitment of some kind, either contacting or participating, maybe financially supporting, sharing things on social media. This is a lot of work, but it's important work. And if we're going to have a country be what we want it to be, we have to do this work. And there's nobody to do it but you. There's a bunch of additional resources here in terms of area organizations, congressional contact, how you can defend democracy. But the time to act is now. Our neighbors' lives depend on it. Our economy depends on it. Most importantly, our democracy depends on it. What will you do this month? Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, Ed, just let me know when you'd like me to start with the questions.
Start now.
All right.
Enjoy all the hearts and red hearts and blue hearts and attaboys.
There you go, Ed.
And Ed, on every one of for the last 2 weeks, every one of our coffee and conversations, we break right in the middle of it to make 5 calls. And we ask everybody on that call, usually 80 to 100 people, to make 5 calls, and they do. And it takes us about 5 or 6 minutes. We'll add this
That's
to
great.
it.
That's great, Bill. Well, we have a lot of suggestions here of ways we can be supported.
Right.
My computer still looks like on its last legs. I hope that it
Your
stays
slides are
away.
down. Yeah, your slides are down, Ed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I still want to answer questions.
Okay, we will go to the first one. Okay, S. Linden is asking, there is supposed to be a 20-day limitation on ICE detention centers holding kids. That's what they used to get the Russian family out of Dilley. But what about the sick 2-month-old? Was he kept longer than that before the family was dumped in Mexico where the baby got skilled care?
You know more about it than I do. I can look into that a little bit more. Just leave that on the list of questions that I gotta look into afterwards because I
Okay.
don't have answers for that right now.
Okay, Chris is asking, my question is, if the Democrats hold the line on no funding for ICE without reforms, when will they run too low on funds to keep up the number of ICE agents and the office spaces they are leasing? I personally say abolish ICE now.
Well, okay. There's 2 things to say here. One is, um, unfortunately, their big beautiful bill allocated humongous amounts of money to ICE and Border Patrol. So even though right now DHS is not funded, they could go the rest of the year on what they've already been given. So the fact that we're holding DHS hostage to try and get um, federal try and get reasonable limits on what they can do is not going to stop ICE agents from being paid their salaries even through the rest of this year because they've already pre-funded the whole year. It's more like air traffic controllers and TSA agents that are going to be working without pay instead of ICE agents. But now let me address your other comment about um, abolishing ICE. Look, there's a reason we need to have a law enforcement agency that enforces our laws. So just saying, we went through this. We went through this once in the defund the police era, 10 years ago, maybe. Um, and we can't just totally defund the police. We have to reform them, not defund. Now, maybe that means we can save some money. Maybe it means we can have social services do some stuff. In this case, maybe it means instead of arresting everybody who's on a work permit and putting them in jail and spending tons of money holding them in jail, we should continue to allow them to work so that they're paying taxes and we don't have to feed them in jail. We can probably reform this process so that it's humane and is less expensive. But there is a concern about the how should I say this? The the structure, the kind of people they brought into ICE, and the kind of instructions they've given them. They 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 built a Gestapo, and it may very well be that we have to eliminate ICE just to get rid of the Gestapo. But that doesn't mean there won't be somebody else doing the same job. We might have to rebuild something like ICE that that enforces our laws in a humane, cost-effective manner instead of this secret police Gestapo manner. And maybe that means we abolish ICE, but still we replace it with something else. So let's not get all distracted by a defund the police kind of strategy. Maybe reform. I think reform is a better word than abolish or defund. Thank you.
Okay, let me go to the next question, Ed. Bruce has a question. Is this tyranny? The need for a judicial warrant to enter a home with undocumented immigrants. The Trump administration's actions have taken advantage of broadly worded provisions in federal law. Here, DHS General Counsel James Percival said, one, legal aliens aren't entitled to the same Fourth Amendment protections as U.S. citizens. His argument is that kicking in the front doors of the homes of people where undocumented immigrants may be staying or smashing the windows of their cars is not unreasonable. The Fourth Amendment states the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures.
Yes, I understand that's the argument.
Mhm.
And most, most, first of all, I'm disinclined to give any credence to anything that any administration official has to say, because we've seen repeatedly how they lie to us about what's happening. So I don't want to hear this from an administration official. I want to hear it from a law professor. I want to hear it from a judge. I want to hear it from somebody who's not part of Trump's um, administration. And what you hear from those people is that the civil rights embodied in our Constitution are afforded to all residents of our country, whether they're citizens or not. You know, when the Constitution was written, there was no concept of citizenship. And for decades, anybody who showed up on our shores was considered to be an American and was protected by all the constitutional rights in our Constitution. So, no, the federal laws which allow for use of administrative warrants to arrest undocumented people on the streets cannot be extended legally to break into somebody's house. Now, the breaking your car window is kind of a middle ground, but breaking into your house, breaking into a house just because there might be an undocumented person in there, no, that is unconstitutional on the face of it. And the people who are saying that they can do that are pushing the law further than the law was designed to be pushed. That wasn't the intent of Congress. No courts have supported that viewpoint. And what you're hearing here is the forces on the right deciding that doing what they want to do, as stupid as it is, doing what they want to do is more important than following our Constitution, and we cannot accept that. So if one of the things we have to have in this shutdown compromise is you can continue to use administrative warrants to arrest people on the streets, but you can't use an administrative warrant to break into somebody's home just because you think there's an undocumented person in there. Period. Thank you.
Okay. Bruce's second question. Who sets the number of refugee admissions in the country a year? Shouldn't it be Congress, not the president?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the Congress refuses to to undertake their authority. The and the reason that Congress refuses to undertake their authority is because well, part of it is because some people on the right have always wanted to do the things that Trump is doing, and they can never get it through Congress. And now that the Republicans are in control of both houses, they just refuse to undertake their responsibility of oversight of the administration because they're happy to stand back and let Trump do this stuff. But the other part of it is it's not always that. Sometimes it's they're afraid of Trump's political power. They're afraid that if they don't support what Trump wants to do, they'll get primared in the next election. They'll be out of power, and then they won't be able to do anything for their constituents. And interestingly enough, I have long, and we see some senators and some House members standing up to Trump now. A few of them, mostly because they're not running again, and mostly because they don't care if Trump threatens them with a primary because they're not going to run again anyway. So I have always been against term limits, but this makes me think that maybe term limits are a good idea because it will cause us to have a large number of representatives who can't run again, which means they can't be politically blackmailed and they will have the spine to do what's right for our country. But yes, Congress is supposed to be doing a lot of stuff that Trump is doing. Congress is supposed to be levying tariffs. Congress is supposed to be setting our immigration policies, and they're not doing it now. If we get the House, well, we will get the House, but getting the House is not getting Congress. Even getting the Senate is not getting Congress because if we are amazingly lucky and we win the Senate, we won't win it by enough to avoid a filibuster, or more importantly, to avoid presidential veto. So at the very least, we can get Congress and the House to start doing some oversight through investigations and committee hearings and the likes. But it's going to be difficult to restrain this president through congressional action unless more and more and more Republicans want us to do that. The Congress really only works effectively when it works in a bipartisan manner, and we'd have to get Congress to work in a bipartisan manner to stop some of the stupid things Trump is doing, and we need political support built on the right for that to happen. And I don't want to hold my breath. I don't know that's going to happen. So I think the most we can hope for, my battery is about to die again. What's going on here? The most we can hope for is congressional committees that we can stop legislation. If we hold the House, we can stop legislation. We can shine a light through congressional committees what's happening, but we're probably going to be stuck until 2028 to get full control of our government.
Ooh, that's a sad thought, Ed, but a true one. Okay, Gretchen has a question. What can we do to stop and eliminate the for-profit prison system?
Well, once again, that would have to be a congressional action. I think it's something we need to pay attention to. But just like reforming our immigration policies, reforming our prison policies, making a lot of reformations we want to make, we have to get control of this government before we can do any of that stuff. So there's a lot of things you want to do, but right now, the biggest fish we got to fry is to get control of the government. Make sure that they don't have full control of Congress after 2026, so we can start moving in the right direction. Get the White House back in 2028, and then we can start talking about immigration reform or prison reform. But I don't see that we can do it any other way at the federal level. I mean, states have state powers to do these kind of things, but I think we're talking about the federal.
Okay. S. Linden is asking, do you know how many corporations have actually spoken up against the immigrant purge? I saw one the other day and thought, that's a little late.
There aren't many. I don't know how many, but there aren't many because they're all too afraid of what Trump can do through regulation and through the DOJ to affect companies. Look at what he's doing with broadcast news. He threatens them with revocation of licenses, threatens them with prosecutions, lawsuits. Um, a lot of our corporations are not standing up for what's right. But remember, corporations are there to make money. Corporations are there to make a profit. That's what corporations really care about. Corporations don't care about your civil rights. In fact, corporations might be happy for you to have less civil rights because your civil rights might stand in the way of their making a profit. I think the thing I'm going to do next month is going to be on um, how how we're not becoming a democracy because we have too much power in the hands of the rich and corporations. But uh, don't hold your breath expecting corporations to save our democracy. We have to do it, and once we do it, and once we get control, then we can put in the regulations necessary to ensure that corporations don't take advantage of workers and don't take advantage of the situations to try and reduce the power of the citizens just so that they can make higher profits.
Okay. Nicole is asking, what independent agency is following the economic destruction Trump is causing by his war on immigrants? Because the Department of Labor sure isn't.
There aren't any. There seems to be only one independent agency anymore. Congress created what they consider to be agencies that are independent of the political arm of the administration because they wanted to see um, this country governed not by partisan politics, but um, by professionals who understand what's good for our economy, what's good for our freedoms, what's good for our society. Um, and a lot of people on the right, especially a lot of corporations, they don't like this because it gets in the way of their power. It gets in the way of their ability to make money. Um, and recently, Trump has been well, part of Project 2025 was a statement that all aspects of the administration aren't really independent. They all work for Trump, and they're all things that Trump can change if he wants to. And their argument is, and I understand this argument, their argument is, look, if you win an election, that means you ought to have the right to implement the policies that you ran on. And if some independent agency is outside of your control and you can't implement the policies you ran on, well, the fact that you won the election means you ought to be able to change that independent agency. In other words, their argument is that independent agencies stand in the way of of political results. That a guy who wins the election ought to be able to implement the policies he wants. And to some extent, I understand that. But Congress created these agencies that are supposed to be independent of the current political climate to provide some stability and continuity of government so that we're not just like a car with no driver going down the road, bouncing off this guardrail and bouncing off that guardrail. Um, so there, right now, it seems like, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, the only truly independent agency we have is the Federal Reserve. And I guess they feel that way because they probably have stock accounts. But every other federal agency that Trump has said he's going to fire the members of or take control of, Supreme Court has said, well, we're not going to stop you. So right now there aren't very many independent agencies, I'm sorry to say.
Okay, S. Linden is asking, why don't Democrats take advantage of the blame Biden on immigrant control by firing back about the uncompleted and ineffective Trump wall at the border? What a joke. So what did Trump do that Biden didn't?
I don't think whataboutism is a good way to approach things. And that's what that is. So you're doing this, well, what about that? No. Address what's going on right now in a straightforward manner, as I have done in this presentation. And I don't think that saying, well, maybe this is wrong, but what you did is wrong. That's no defense. Maybe this doesn't work, but what you did doesn't work. That's no defense. Let's just talk about what would work. And let's try and get ourselves in a position where we can do what we know would work. And don't go with this whataboutism stuff, please.
Okay, give me one moment, Ed.
I'll give you two. That's free.
Take a breath. All right. Let's see. S. Linden is asking now, does refugee status protect immigrants at all? I think I just read that ICE might enlarge their catches to refugees. How is that determined and verified?
Okay, so here's the situation. I mentioned this in the presentation, and I'm glad when somebody asks a question that I think I already answered, because I know I went through those slides really fast. So let me say this again. When when a refugee, when an asylum seeker shows up at our border and says, I'm applying for asylum, first of all, there's two things that can happen. One is the government can say, well, that's ridiculous. You have no grounds whatsoever to apply for asylum. Turn around and walk away. Or they can say, well, you might have grounds. We need to look at your case carefully. We're going to allow you to enter the country, and we're going to have a hearing to see whether you get to stay as an asylum seeker or not. Now, the courts that do those hearings are not part of our third branch, our judiciary. The courts that do those hearings are part of our administration. They're not really courts. The administration courts are part of the Department of Justice. And what happens is that thing is so underfunded that it takes years to get a hearing. It takes literally years to find out whether your asylum claim is going to be accepted or not. And what that means is that, what do you do with those people for a couple of years? Well, you got two choices. And the government pretty much has its can do whatever it wants. It can parole them into the country and say, here's a work permit, here's a social security number, go work, go support yourself and your family, pay taxes, and you'll get a hearing someday. And we'll figure out whether you get to stay or not. And in most cases, when they get a hearing, they're told, no, you can't stay, you got to go back. Or the government can throw them in jail and just keep them in jail until their hearing. And as I said, Biden did a lot of paroling into the country, a whole lot, tons of it. And that was really good for our economy because it really helped us come through this pandemic safely. Once again, my laptop is screwing up here. And what Trump is doing,
new
no,
cord.
it's something to do with the power supply connector. I mean, the power supply connector is there, but it's not charging, and then it is, and then it's not. So, anyway, so Trump is taking the approach of, I'm not going to parole anybody in the country. Anybody who comes across the border and requesting asylum, if I have to give a hearing for him, I'm going to keep him in jail until the hearing. And now, yesterday, he said, all those people that Biden brought in and paroled into the country, I'm going to put them back in jail. I'm going to undo his decision that they can wait for their hearing in the country, and they're going to have to wait for their hearing in jail. And that's going to have devastating effects on it. Just as bringing in all those workers helped us recover from the pandemic, kicking all those workers out now and putting them in jail. Number one, we have to pay for their upkeep in jail, and number two, they won't be working and paying taxes. This is immensely stupid. Um, and yet they have the power to do this. It's going to take political will to stop because legally they can do it. I'm not sure that answered the question. Did that answer? At this point, I'm not sure I remember what the question was. Did I answer that question or not?
Oh, well, I don't know, Ed. It basically said, does refugee status protect immigrants at all, and how is that determined and verified?
Okay, I think I answered the question. The answer is refugee status is granted by the government at their whim. And we can see now that that protection is temporary. If another government comes along and says, we don't think so, then they can undo it. And I don't know if the courts will be much help in that area. I think that the biggest help in that area will be political pressure. And we've seen there has been some retrenchment by Trump based on based on outside pressure. I mean, every time he does something that the stock market doesn't like, he retreats. Um, and some of his tariffs he's retreating on because he's seen the negative effects of them. And he's starting to understand that affordability really is an issue. His cabinet is telling him you have to address the affordability issues. And the problem is that every time they tell Trump to go out and make a speech and stay on message, he wanders off message and starts talking about this, that, and the other. Um, so it's a very challenging thing for the Republican Party to try and make progress with this particular guy they've supported for the presidency. But to my money, I think that the best thing to do is to have millions of people out on the streets on March 28th and to put tremendous political pressure on these guys so they stop doing intrinsically stupid things that are going to damage our country.
Definitely. Okay, Eric has a question. I know he had to leave, but he still has a question. It says, do you believe that immigration policy can change if public discourse centered more on immigrant contributions rather than perceived costs rooted in stereotype and criminality?
I'm pretty sure it can change because I'm pretty sure we're going to see the negative effects of what Trump is doing. And, some things are hard to change, but they're easier to change after there's been a crisis. So when we have problems in our society, in our economy, because of what he's doing, I mean, the whole affordability thing is part of this. Uh, when we have those problems, it's easier to make the argument that this other policy, we tried it, it hurt us, it was wrong, it didn't help us. So let's put that aside and try a different policy. So I think that the prospects for making some real progress in our country in 2029 and 2030 are pretty good because we'll have gotten through this nightmare and we'll have put adults in charge who really care about the country. And by the way, if you haven't listened to Governor Pritzker's State of the State address yesterday or the day before, you need to look at that because he's the kind of guy that could be an adult in charge of the country who will help lead us in a better direction. We will have a leader, him or somebody else, who will lead us in a better direction, and we will address issues under that leadership that need to be addressed. And I have every confidence in that. But we have to live through this. We have to work through this dark period to get on the other side of this mountain. And when you're on the other side of this mountain, we'll have lots of arguments we can make and lots of political support for making some changes.
Okay, Richard's question. But Border Patrol that has virtually unlimited purview as well will still exist, right? Reform immigration law entirely.
Well, yes, the Border Patrol and ICE, some form of ICE, will still exist. But look, just because they exist doesn't mean they have to be a Gestapo. They existed under Biden and they didn't do this crap.
Yep.
I agree with reform, but reform doesn't mean elimination. Reform doesn't mean replacement necessarily. We're a country of laws, and we need to have ways to enforce our law. But we need to have ways to enforce them that are humane, that are constructive, that are not damaging to our society and our economy. The Constitution is not a suicide pact. The Constitution is a way that we want our country to run for the good of all of our residents, citizens or not. And um, we will get there once we decide we're going to have a country, as JB said, that's structured on compassion and sympathy and love and principles like the guy that Colbert wasn't allowed to interview on air, and he interviewed him on YouTube instead. He said, "We're here. If you want to call yourself a Christian, then you want to follow the precepts of JC that said, feed the hungry and heal the sick and welcome the stranger." And we we're gonna that's the kind of ethos that ran this country for 200 years. And there's a backlash against it right now. But we'll get over that. And we've had backlashes before. And as as somebody once said, the arc of justice is long, but it bends in the long term. It bends in the right direction. So don't be overly discouraged by this short term setback. In the long term, we'll make progress here.
Okay, Aaron's question. Any suggestions for the way DHS is way overpaying for their concentration camps? In just one instance, the federal government paid approximately 99 million more than was paid for the property just 2 years ago.
Well, I mean that's all part of the the way that the the really rich people and corporations um, bend this government to their benefit instead of the benefit of the citizens. The suggestions we have are win the House and have the House run um, investigations on that and bring this to public light, and then cause a bunch of anger amongst the voters and use that anger to make sure we win the White House in 2028. I mean, that's how our political system works.
Beatrice has an inquiry, which is a little bit long, so bear with me. She says, I'm deeply concerned that people are being abused and killed during ICE operations without a way for them to defend themselves. It's like we have to take the abuse and hope to God that we won't be injured or killed. Why aren't more elected officials leveraging local law enforcement officers and or National Guard members to actively protect targeted communities and counter the criminal actions of federal agents, rogue actors acting as federal agents, and other terroristic organizations supporting them?
There are states attorneys from multiple blue states talking to each other right now about how you can do that. But you got to understand, it's difficult because those guys got guns, just like we got guns. So what are you going to do? Have local police try and stand between ICE and a demonstrator that ICE wants to get to? Especially in a situation like they had in Minnesota and Minneapolis, where the ICE officers outnumbered the local police by 5 to 1. I think there's a lot of discussion about that, but actually, most of it centers around not so much um, having a police presence that stops ICE from doing bad things. It's more about having a judicial presence at the state level that holds individual ICE officers responsible for their actions. Nobody is empowered to break state law. I mean, it could be that state law doesn't override federal law, but still, if the state law says you can't do something and ICE people do it, we ought to be able to arrest them, find out who they are, and that's one of the demands that Senate Democrats have is that the FBI or the DOJ has to cooperate with state authorities when federal agents break state laws so that state laws can be used to bring accountability to these people. And if we can get to the point where we start putting ICE agents in jail for what they're doing, that will cause them to slow down. I mean, they already slowed down some in Minneapolis. They pulled out of Minneapolis because they saw the political damage they were causing to the GOP. But believe you me, blue states attorney generals are on this case. They're deep in discussions on how they can do this. They're drafting legislation they can get through state courts, state legislatures to give them more teeth in this area. And these things are slow, but that kind of work is being undertaken. But it's more about legal authority than it is about the National Guard. We don't really want to see a fighting war between the Illinois National Guard and um, and the federal ICE. We really don't want to see those two guys, those two groups pulling out guns pointing at one another. That wouldn't be good.
Scary, Ed. Nora's inquiry. I'm concerned that American voters won't be patient enough to wait until 2028 for Congress to prove that a Democratic majority can actually pass reasonable laws. Republicans keep getting voted in, and if a slight Democrat majority will be ineffectual, Republicans will be voted in as the antidote. How do you message that? We need even more Democrats elected if voters can point to their impotency as reason not to vote for more of them.
Okay, let me think about that here. So, as I mentioned, you can't really get Congress to do anything meaningful without support from both sides of the aisle. Because, sure, you can get the House to pass something, but most stuff you can't get through the Senate unless you can get past um, the filibuster. And if the president is the other party, then you got to get past a um, a presidential veto, which takes 2/3 of the House of the Senate. So the most important thing that Democrats can do is they can stop the GOP from passing stuff. They can stop the GOP from passing another big, beautiful bill. They can stop the GOP from passing tax breaks. If we had the House and the Senate, uh, we could, well, we still have to get past the presidential veto. It's still hard to do anything as long as Trump is in office and can veto legislation, because it's unlikely, no matter how good we do, it's unlikely we'll have a veto-proof majority in the Senate for sure. Maybe not even in the House. So, how do you message things? You got to tell the truth. And if people need to be educated, you have to educate. You have to say, if here's what we can do and here's what we can't do. We can stop legislation, we can hold hearings, we can bring the truth to light. But if you want us to actually do something big, you got to give us both the House and the Senate and the presidency. And if you don't give us both the House and the Senate and the presidency, then what do you expect? And if we can't do all you want to do when Trump is still in office, the answer to that is not to put J.D. Vance in office. The answer to that is to put J.D. Pritzker or Gavin Newsom or somebody who cares about working people instead of caring about oligarchs in office. So when we win the midterms, we start another campaign. And when we win the midterms, we start the campaign of showing the damage they've done to us and what we're going to do to restore that damage through bringing responsible leadership back to the administration. Uh, that's what I believe that will work. I can't imagine people. I have to say, I can't imagine anybody would vote for Trump for the second term anyway, but they did. Um, but the cards were stacked against us at that time because of post-pandemic inflation. This time, the cards are stacked for us because he still hasn't fixed the affordability issue, and people mostly care about the economy. And if Trump said I can fix the economy quickly, and he didn't, and Vance comes out and says I can fix the economy quickly, will they believe him? And now that Trump proved that he couldn't do it, uh, that's the kind of message we need.
Okay. Garrick's inquiry. Late in Trump's first term, he defunded the immigration judiciary, which set back asylum requests for immigrants. How has that affected our current state with immigration?
Well, um, I don't think it's affected it a whole lot. I mean, the immigration courts were were not properly funded before he did. We had a huge backlog of asylum cases. Um, we still have we don't have an enormously growing backlog of asylum cases because when he um, what he's done now is he stopped accepting new asylum cases. I mean, when people come to the border now, as I said, when people come to the border, you're supposed to look at them and say, "Do you have any kind of reasonable case at all?" And and if the answer is no, you turn around and go away. But if the answer is yeah, you might have a case, come into the country, we'll give you a hearing. Right now, he's not even doing that. Everybody who shows up at the border now, he's saying, turn around and go away. I don't want to hear it. No asylum, no asylum claims accepted. And people in the country that have pending asylum claims, he's terminating. He's saying people show up for their asylum for their, they're on parole. They have to check in. When you're on parole, you got to check in every 6 months. People show up to check in for their parole check in, and what they hear is, we've decided it was a mistake to let you into the country, that your claim is meaningless. You have to leave now. In fact, there's an ICE agent standing outside the door to help you leave now. So the fact that the immigration courts are underfunded hasn't gotten a whole lot worse because we're not taking any more immigration cases anymore. We're not taking any more asylum cases anymore. So I don't think that's been a major factor. But the major factor is that we kind of were using the asylum courts as a way to get more workers into the country, and that's being reversed. And that's bad for our economy, but it's also bad for these people who need help. We should bring in these people who need help because they need our help and we need their labor. It's a win-win situation for us. And that's what's going on here. I don't think the further reduction in funding of the administration of the asylum courts is a new problem for us. It's just an old problem. It's always been there. It's been there for a long time.
Okay, Richard is asking, are you familiar with Scott Galloway's economic impact plan for big tech that is aimed at disarming ICE by impacting the top 10 tech companies? If so, do you have thoughts?
I'm not familiar with that. When you're going to send me the chat, and I will make note of that suggestion and research it and comment on it when I send out the slides.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Yes, we'll do that. And right now, this is the last question, unless I find some other ones in the chat. Vanita is asking, how do we address in the short term? As of early 2026, administration is undertaking a massive expansion of ICE detention capacity with plans involving roughly 150 new leases, office expansions, and the conversion of industrial warehouses into detention centers nationwide.
Yeah, give me the start of the question again. How do I what about that?
How do we address in the short term?
Okay, so in the short term, there's nothing we can do about it other than publicize it and call it the waste of money that it is. In the medium term, when we get control of the House, we can implement actual oversight of the administration and do a much better job of showing the population how wasteful this is. How yes, they're expanding their detention capacity because they intend to arrest everybody that Biden brought into the country and is working now. We can show how horrible the living conditions are, how inhumane these activities are. They're damaging families and children. They're damaging our economy. They're damaging our country. In the short term, I don't know what we can do about that other than complain about it in mediums like this and inform the public and build the political will to make sure we get the House and the Senate in the medium term. And then in the medium term, we can bring oversight to the administration, maybe force them to make some changes. But in the long run, we can't really fix any of this stuff completely until we get him out of office.
Definitely. I did find another question for you, Ed.
Okay.
It's very short, but it's a
That's
question.
fine. Okay.
Sita is asking, can't states stop these warehouses?
I don't know about that. Um, that's a good question. Can states stop these warehouses? Well, I imagine some some states may have the ability to do that. But I would also think that most of these warehouses are being built in states that don't want to do that. I would expect that most of these warehouses are being built in red states where the state government um, and a large number of the citizens are happy with with have been okay. They're not. They've been conned into believing that immigrants are the source of our problems when in fact they aren't. So they're supportive of Trump's uh, overall goals to stop losing our country to immigrants from certain kinds of countries that Trump characterized in terms I don't wish to repeat. Um, so I don't know. I'd have to look into it. I will look into it. I'll look through it when I see it in the chat. I will do a little bit of research. But I bet what I'll find is that most of these warehouses are being built in red states where the red states don't dare challenge Trump on it.
Okay. And now Sita did put in the chat, she said, we did in Illinois. So Sita, I hope I'm pronouncing your first name correctly. Please tell me if I'm not. But yeah, she did say apparently she is in Illinois. So, apparently it was stopped in Illinois, wherever it was being attempted.
Well, I'm sure the states, one of the important things about our country is that states do have a lot of rights. Anything that isn't explicitly granted as a right to the federal government is reserved by the states as their rights. So, like I said, when blue state attorney generals are getting together to talk about what we can do, they're leveraging states' rights.
Right.
And so we can do here in Illinois and in other blue states. And one of the most interesting things about this whole thing is that most of these blue states that have these rights are also economically very important to the nation. So we have leverage, not just because we have states' rights. We have leverage because we contribute a lot of taxes that go to a lot of red states. Now there are some red states that make a lot of money too, Texas and Florida, but California, New York, and Illinois and Michigan and Minnesota, there's a whole lot of federal revenue comes from these states,
Yeah.
and that gives us some power too. So uh, states' rights are important, and we'll continue, especially when we have the kind of leadership I see in our state government. We'll continue to leverage that stuff. Well, it's almost 9 o'clock, and I'm pretty tired after a long day, so I'd like to wrap it up now. Thank Thank you all for being here. I'm going to get the chat. I'm going to look through there for other comments. I mean, last time I got the chat, there were some comments in the chat where people were just talking to one another that I thought was interesting. I learned some stuff. I provided some comments, even though it wasn't a big bold question mark. So I'll do that again this time, and we'll send out these slides. You'll have all the links, but pay attention. We need to work on this. We all need to work on this. And I'm calling all of you to get not just yourselves, but everybody you know to get involved here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ed. I know your computer probably needs a break too, huh?
Well, right now it's back up to 45% battery, so I can't figure out why I've got it plugged in this whole time. Sometimes it's charging, sometimes it's not. I'll have to figure this
Could
out.
be a bad
And
cord, could be power.
I'm
Power.
supposed to know something about computers.
Power.
Okay, Dill, I'm done.
Yeah. So, Ed, thank you so much. You have this down to a science, and I truly think you do, and it means a lot. I think to everybody who comes on to understand the problem, the current situation, and then some ideas of where we can go. And then you boldly go where many speakers do not. you 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 take unlimited questions, and I appreciate that about you. To everybody who is still left on the call, and there's still about 60 of us left on, um, you'll get a summary questionnaire that'll come out automatically. Let us know what you think about this presentation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I can tell you that all of our leads every month are doing programs, and I like to send them the the satisfaction surveys, those that think it was a good program and those that did not. And I think that's great. To you that are still on, uh, we mentioned it a little bit in the beginning, every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. in the morning. That is 9 a.m. Central Time. We have coffee and conversation. Yeah, it is. It's saying he's sleeping, but it's a great opportunity. There's no presentation. People are just invited to speak about what they're thinking about, and the conversation ebbs and flows. It's like a bunch of folks getting together around a coffee table at a restaurant, and you just don't know where it's going to start, where it's going to end, but it's always current, and it's always about what is happening to us and people across the country. People join from not only across the U.S. but other countries, etc. And we invite you all to attend that. And then tomorrow, uh, we're not only going to have the coffee and conversation at 9 a.m. At 5 p.m., we're going to have our unhappy happy hour. And we've been doing these calls now for a little over 5 years and 7 months, every week, every day. And it's been really cool to see everybody that's come together. It's quite, as we call it, a community, quite a tribe. And that is why we've grown to almost 10,000 members locally and 25,000 across the country. Now, not everybody joins, but it is interesting. This weekend on Sunday at 5 o'clock, we're going to have our Sorting Soup, which is our book club that is finishing up on the Project 2025, What You Can Do to Resist. And they've been going through chapter and chapter. They read the stuff and then they talk about it. Very interesting. That's at 5 p.m. Central. And then at 7 p.m., we're going to have a video that we're going to show Martin Luther King, his life. And I think you're going to find that emotional and wonderful. And he was one of our great treasures of our country. So, and then on Monday evening, Indivisible, Illinois at 7:30 is going to have a panel to discuss Black History Month and why that is important. So from the Burbs, we're keeping this front and center. So that is a great thing. So for those of you who joined, thanks for taking the time. For Ed, I know you need a break. You've been working nonstop, and nice job doing 2 programs back to back. And that was great. So we'll see you all. We look forward to seeing you. And 9 a.m. will come tomorrow morning. If you're on, we ask you to raise your hand and just let us know where you're from. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Have
you,
a great
Bill.
evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I'll be there, Bill.
I know you're always